I'm Sonia Schuyler with the Champlain Valley League of Women Voters, and I want to welcome you all to this first forum for the candidates for Mayor of Burlington, sponsored by 7 Days, Channel 17, Town Meeting TV, and Champlain Valley League of Women Voters. We're very excited to see how many people have come out on this cold night, and we look forward to a good evening of exchange of ideas. The League is very interested in promoting citizen participation in government, and this is certainly a way to begin. So our moderators this evening are Matthew Roy, news editor for 7 Days, and Sasha Goldstein, who's the deputy news editor for 7 Days, and they will explain the format for the program. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to a packed Contoys Auditorium. It's great to see so many people out tonight to participate in this process. During tonight's forum, we'll be asking questions that have been submitted by members of the public. If you have a question, please just head over to this table, write it down on a card, and leave it with one of these good folks over here. We'll start tonight by giving our candidates an opportunity to make an opening statement of up to 3 minutes each. After that, Sasha Goldstein and I will take turns posing questions. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer. A representative of the League of Women Voters will be keeping time right here in front of them. After a minute, candidates will see a green card. After 90 seconds, a yellow card goes up. After 2 minutes, red means stop. At our discretion, Sasha or I may offer a follow-up question or offer candidates a minute for their rebuttal of another candidate's answer. Toward the end of the evening, candidates will have the opportunity to make closing statements of up to 2 minutes. The order of the opening statements was determined by drawing lots, and the order of who answers questions first will rotate. With that, we'll start with the opening statements. First up, Miro Weinberger.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sasha, and 7 Days for doing this. Appreciate Channel 17 and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring tonight. And thank all of you for coming out to really get the campaign and this election season started. 6 years ago, I ran for mayor because the city that I loved, Burlington, was in deep trouble. Our finances, our credit rating was plummeting towards the edge of junk bond status, and we were just one financial bump in the road away from maybe even having trouble paying payroll for our officers and our firefighters. The northern waterfront was an eyesore and was stalled and had been that way for a long time. We were making no progress. And then Burlington Telecom, an ambitious effort to give Burlingtonians high-speed, affordable internet choice, was on the edge of foreclosure, with Citibank demanding tens of millions of additional dollars from taxpayers and threatening to rip the fiber optic cable out of the ground. The people of Burlington took a chance. They voted for a fresh start, and the new administration came into office and rolled up its sleeves, and working with the City Council and the people of Burlington, we have addressed all of those issues and more. We have gotten our A credit rating back, locking in more than $12 million of interest savings over the years ahead, making our schools stronger, our city stronger, and the Burlington Electric Department, our other enterprise funds stronger. We have transformed the northern waterfront into one of the most beautiful parts of the city, realigning the bike path, building a great new park at the northern end of the urban reserve, and access to a new public beach, building a world-class skate park, and we're about to see more with the opening of the Community Sailing Center and more to come after that in this coming year. And we have saved Burlington Telecom. We have, through a multi-year process culminating in a 10-2 vote at the City Council with progressives, Democrats, Republicans, and independents voting together, we have ensured that Burlingtonians for generations to come will have high-speed, affordable internet choice with Burlington Telecom run according to Burlington values. We have, in short, laid the foundation for even greater successes in the years ahead. The opportunity for the next mayor will be to take these savings, take this momentum, and to make more progress on some of our top priorities. 6 years ago was a time for change. Now is time to finish the job. It's time to finish the job with our sustainable infrastructure plan, which we have just finished the first year of. It's time to finish the job of transforming our failing suburban mall that has dominated our downtown into a vibrant, urban, mixed-use, mixed-income neighborhood. It's time to finish the job with creating a new early learning initiative for our most vulnerable children, ages 0 to 3, to strengthen our schools and strengthen our community. In short, we've come a long way in the last 6 years. Let's keep moving forward.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carina Driscoll. I'm a lifelong resident of Burlington. I have seen Burlington at its best and most vibrant. I am a mother of 2. My children attend the Burlington Public Schools, and I'm a business owner of 10 years. I'm running for mayor because we need to recommit to public engagement in the city. I am finding that regardless of class or constituency group, people throughout the city are feeling disenfranchised. We are losing our sense of place and our sense of belonging. And I think that's hurting Burlington pride. Let's get people back at the front end of the conversation, not on the receiving end of decisions made on City Hall. It's not good when decisions in Burlington are made by a small group of people in City Hall rather than by reaching out into our neighborhoods and engaging our citizens. Decisions need to come from the people who live here. We are a city with a history of leading the way by bringing people together and innovating to address our challenges. We need to change the way we move forward with our community assets in this city. We have adopted a highest bidder process for dispensing with our assets, looking for private interests to move us forward rather than engaging our community to create new innovative solutions. And we now have more unfinished business than we did 6 years ago. We are no closer to a resolution of Moran Plant since the unilateral decision out of the mayor's office to end discussions with New Moran Incorporated. That project was an example of how local investment, emerging businesses, and nonprofit partners like the farmers market and local creative people can come together and lead the way, and we need to reopen that conversation. And Memorial is a new unanswered question. We've shut the building, and we have no plans. Let's find a way to save this important community asset that served us for 90 years as a community space for arts, music, and civic engagement. In this age of development, we need a mayor who understands that Burlington is a highly marketable city with our beautiful lake and our green mountains. And we need a mayor who will go to bat for us rather than accommodating private investments well for our city. We need a mayor who understands that the addition of market rate rentals and condos is not the way to get to affordable housing. We must again prioritize building affordable. We must also have a mayor whose first instinct is to protect affordable housing when it is at risk, not to take a wait-and-see approach. We need to prioritize addressing the needs of our seniors. With over 800 seniors on the waiting list for Cathedral Square, we need to realize we're not going to build our way out of the problem. We need to help seniors maintain their independence in their homes and help our families accommodate seniors in their homes. We need to support all our families and in turn our local businesses by making sure we have quality schools. It's not an either or, and we cannot balance the books of our city on the backs of our schools. We need to recommit to our transfer of half of the pilot funds to facilitate programs for kids and families, and that's where I'll leave it, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Infinite.
Hi, folks. My name is Infinite, and I've been a Burlington resident for about 30 years now. And I first want to acknowledge my partner, Safira, who couldn't be here today, who has actually served as the conscience of our campaign. She's at a birthing class right now, and thanks to my mother-in-law for covering for me tonight at the birthing class. And I'd also like to thank my amazing campaign team who have put their heart and soul into this campaign with next to little or nothing to work with. I'm running for mayor because I was actually recruited by my neighbors and friends to serve a growing number of Burlington residents who feel like, just like other communities across America, that widening economic inequality and rising unfair tax burdens and low participation has been the three greatest threats to our local economy and our democracy. If one is not personally struggling, it's easy to talk about how much progress the city has made and how inclusive it is. Yet poverty has increased steadily in the city for the past 6 years, while participation has decreased. And I've been working on these issues in Burlington as a community leader and organizer on the ground. In 2015, I actually organized an event in this space for voter eligibility, trying to convince Burlington voters that we had everything to gain by restoring voting rights for all Burlington residents. I also serve as a NPA Neighborhood Planning Assembly Steering Committee member for a few years, working with my neighbors all year round on issues that are the most important to them. This work is connected to two key priorities in our campaign: community development and participation. When I say community development, I mean our local government should be doing everything it can to help build the capacity of its residents. That's the reason why the Community and Economic Development Office was created, to match assets and needs of the community, whether it's about job skills, housing, or financial capital. And this is the priority that I intend to bring to City Hall as a mayor if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. We'll start. This question will go first to Karina. We received many questions about the cost of housing in Burlington and chose this one. What specific actions and changes in city policy are needed to increase access to housing that people can afford?
Right, okay, thank you. So when we talk about affordability in the city, I think we have made progress in the city in large part due to nonprofit partners who continue to invest in affordable housing. But given the cost of development, it's very difficult to move ahead with that. And I believe we can leverage our community assets in a way that we haven't been doing as a city. When given the option to sell a city lot, as we did behind Bove's Restaurant, we decided to sell that to a hotel developer, no strings attached, no expectations. In my opinion, when we have city assets that we're going to put on the market, we can leverage those city assets with things like ground leases and have expectations that what we develop there is affordable. We are not getting at affordability by building market rate units and for rentals and condos. What we're finding is that those units are taking longer to fill, but they are more expensive than the already overpriced units that people are occupying, and it does not drive the cost of rent down. So we need to adjust our policy on affordable housing and get back to building affordable. We can also be working with our families when I was in the legislature, I fought for something called accessory unit legislation, which has since been watered down, but essentially it said no town or municipality shall make any rule that will limit someone from turning their home into a home with an accessory unit. An accessory unit can help people afford their home, afford their taxes. It can help people care for an aging senior in their home as well. We need to do things like eliminate the parking requirement restrictions that make it hard for people to turn their homes into places that can create revenue and make it possible to live in this city. We are pricing ourselves out of our city, and we cannot keep on the path that we are on, or that will just continue to be the case. We are building homes that are going to be sold to people for second and third homes. They're going to be vacant, not all of them, but some of them, and we really need to look at the path we're on and make a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Infinite. On to you.
So I think there's a multi-pronged approach to making affordable housing affordable, right? We can't have a discussion about affordable housing without a real conversation about economic well-being and livable wages, right? So the cost of housing is rising much faster than wages are rising. And so if folks are not making a livable wage, then affordable housing is that much less accessible. And this city actually has exempted some entities from the livable wage ordinance, which I think is a problem. I also think workforce housing, which was talked about during the mall development, but never came through, it never materialized, is also an approach to keeping housing affordable and making it more accessible for people who live in the city. And finally, I know, well, I heard that in the 80s, rent control went down really hard because the real estate industry organized themselves and made sure that the state of Vermont, you know, the legislator didn't let that happen. But we're now in a different time, and we're increasing the density of the city, and so I think it may be time to start revisiting a conversation about rent control in the city.
Thank you. Miro?
The simple answer to how we address our affordable housing crisis is that we need much more housing for people of all backgrounds and incomes and ages. And that is the belief that I brought into office after having served as an affordable housing developer in Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York for 15 years. And it's what we have done as an administration for the last 6 years. We've created more than we've done it a couple ways. We've, first of all, created more than 300 permanently affordable homes, or preserved more than 300 permanently affordable homes. And we've done that in part because we have outstanding housing nonprofits. We have also done it by being a very active and engaged administration. My budgets have all included doubling the Housing Trust Fund, this local tool that allows us to be flexible and respond quickly when emerging needs, like the need to address the Farrington's mobile home park being sold and turning into a North Avenue co-op. We have done it by actively lobbying in Montpelier on issues like the housing bond that passed last year with the support of the mayors who I helped organize and the League of Cities and Towns. That's what we're going to keep doing going forward. However, what we have also said is, we did a study when I first came into office that found that the average Burlingtonian was spending 44% of their income on rent. And we realized that we weren't going to address that. That was one of the worst ratios in the country of its type. We weren't going to address that if all we did is focus on permanently affordable housing, because there will never be enough subsidy to get out of the housing crisis that way. So we have also pushed for more housing for people of all backgrounds and income levels, and we are seeing that start to work. For example, when the downtown mall is turned into a mixed-use, mixed-income neighborhood, there will be 55 permanently affordable homes there, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, inclusionary zoning project in the city's history. We need to keep pushing on both these fronts. We're just starting to see it succeed. If given the chance, this will make Burlington more affordable in the years ahead.
Thank you. This question goes first to Infinite. As one candidate already mentioned in her opening remarks, Memorial Auditorium has been shuttered because of structural issues. What do you see as the city's best way forward for Memorial Auditorium?
Well, I see Memorial Auditorium actually as the perfect opportunity to engage Burlington residents on an all year round basis and trying to figure out and decide what to do with that space, so that our mayor and city council aren't the ones who are deciding what to do with that space, right? That's also, we can use bonding, we can bond, you know, to raise money. You know, I know it's gonna be a very expensive project, but for me, the money actually comes second. It's the process and how we decide as a community what to do with the Memorial Auditorium.
Miro?
Thank you. This administration has been very active on Memorial Auditorium, going back more than 3 years now. In the fall of 2015, 2015, after quite a bit of work, we went to the city council and we said, the Memorial Auditorium is in trouble. Years of neglect have put it in a situation where it is no longer a safe building, where we need to do more than $250,000 of emergency repairs, which we then went out and did, and we need to find the right long-term use for this building. We did those repairs. We retreated from the building as the city engineer said we needed to, and we began working on the right long-term plan. We looked at a possibility of a joint venture with UVM, which would have been continued to be a city-owned public assembly space. That didn't work out, and what we have, so our position that we announced last fall is that the way forward with Memorial Auditorium is that we are missing having a publicly owned, publicly assembly space in the downtown. When we had a Democratic caucus a few weeks ago, we had to have it out at the high school because there's no place to get a big group of people in the downtown anymore, and that's a problem. I've committed to, after a robust public engagement process like we have done on all major projects in the past, we will put in front of the city council, and then if they approve the voters, a plan to modernize Memorial Auditorium, turn it into an outstanding 21st century public assembly space, and put that before the voters to see if the voters are willing to make the investments that it's going to take to put in air conditioning, to put in modern acoustics, to put in other modern amenities, and whether they support a modern programming plan that can actually cause the building to be used actively instead of the long years of decline that we had leading up till 2015. Thanks.
Karina?
Thanks. So Memorial is an example of an ethic for how, the leadership we're seeing come out of City Hall. As recently as September, when we were looking at what to do with Memorial, we, City Hall had put out a request for proposals, basically a request for who would like to come along and solve our city's problems, who would like to do something with our assets. And essentially, when you put out an RFP, you're putting out a highest bidder request. Who can come forth with the best answer for our community asset. I feel strongly that this building, Memorial Auditorium, has served our community for 90 years. To, as I said before, to foster a music and art scene, and to be a civic engagement space as well as to be a market space. And we need to continue our investment in that building. Without answers, the city has shuttered the building and turned off the heat. And I am concerned, as are many people throughout the city, that this is resulting in a more rapid deterioration of the building. And I think that comes from being in a space of not having an answer. I think we can solve our own challenges in our city. We can be creative, and we can find a way to move forward with this asset as well as the other assets that we have in our community. But first, we have to bring people together, invite them to the table, and that includes inviting our private businesses and our private investment, our local investment, with people who are creative in our city and who have lots of ideas and energy. They need to be invited to the table again, as well as nonprofits and organizations. It used to be that City Hall would invite the nonprofit partners in to solve our city's problems, and now it seems that our nonprofit partners have to show up at this bidding process and compete. And there are numerous examples of that happening in the city, and what it's doing is it's stalling some of these projects, and it's disempowering our citizenry, and it's disengaging us from determining how we can provide creative solutions to our city's problems. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll offer Miro Weinberger a minute to rebut.
Great, thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak again because there's a couple points there. Facts are really important, and there are a couple facts that just aren't the case. We never put out an RFP for Memorial Auditorium. We did consider it, and we also continued to engage the community and got the strong sense that there really was strong support for something that has never been put before the people before, which was a plan to keep Memorial Auditorium a publicly owned public assembly space. And so we've committed to doing that. And again, that's what we will have before the council and the voters by the fall. It's also not true to say we've turned off the heat. That would very quickly lead to the erosion of the building. I don't want to see the building erode. I think it's a great building. I think it's an important historic building. I have spent a good chunk of my career doing historic preservation projects. I would like to save it. We're going to put a plan in front of the voters to do just that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Infinite, is there anything else you'd want to say on this for this?
Well, only that the Memorial Auditorium came to my attention as a really big issue after Jim Hallway and folks from the NPAs got together and stood up and decided to, make it an important issue. Before that, I hadn't, heard anything about this administration doing anything towards keeping that building and opening it back up.
And we'll give Karina 1 minute to rebut as well, and then we'll move along.
Yeah, just really briefly, I think there were several times that the message was coming from City Hall that an RFP was coming for Memorial Auditorium, and other partnerships were explored. But the RFP did not come, and I do appreciate the fact that this September, this fall, after pressure from the NPA and after our campaign made it an issue, that the decision was made to keep Memorial Auditorium for the people and to make that commitment. So I think we actually are all on the same page now.
Thank you.
Great. This question will go to Miro first. Come July 1, small-scale cultivation and recreational use of marijuana will be legal in Vermont. Do you support any additional city regulation of marijuana growing or use?
Thank you, Sasha. After a lot of thought and work with the Mayor's Coalition and the League of Cities and Towns, which is the main way in which I engage statewide legislation, I did support the legislation just passed this year. I believe that before taking the next step and having broader legalization, commercialization of marijuana, there are questions that still need to be answered about how do we ensure public safety, how do we ensure that other municipal impacts are addressed. I think we can learn. I think we can do those things, and we will do those things, and we should move towards legalization. But I think we have an opportunity to learn from states that are farther ahead of us, and where you have seen very rapid rollouts following referendums where there have been some issues. I think Vermont's approach of being a little bit more incremental and deliberate has served us well, and I support what's happening, and I will continue to be engaged in it going forward.
Sorry, Miro. I just specifically, are there any additional city regulations you would put in place? I appreciate the
ability to be more specific. The city needs to get money out of any legalization. There needs to be local taxation like we have with alcohol and sales tax and gross receipts. There will be some increased pressure on the Planning and Zoning Department, on the Burlington Police as a result of the addition of these establishments to the downtown, and there need to be revenues so that the city can properly address them. There needs to be authorization given to the municipalities to have zoning authority to decide where and how many of these types of establishments can be created. Those are I think the main things I'll be looking for is taxing authority for revenues and the ability to control the locations and the number with strong zoning policies.
Thank you. Karina.
Thank you. As it stands right now with the legislation, no. I don't think we need any additional laws or zoning regulations as it stands right now. I think it was the right move. What I would say as a parent, is that we need to be thoughtful in how we move forward and the message we're giving our kids, and we need to be, take the time to consider the impact and the message and make sure we're sending the right message. That's what I would add.
So I would also consider a tax, and it would not just be for services. It would be actually for education. I think that education around this issue for our young people is a must. I feel like there may be some people, some winners and some losers, and some folks who will be benefiting from the legalization of marijuana, and then some of our most vulnerable population who may not be informed about what they're doing and what they're putting into their body. And so as far as city regulation is concerned, I would actually require all marijuana dealers to pay into a fund to educate young people.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question goes first to Karina. Do you support safe injection sites in Burlington, and why or why not?
It's hard to believe that we're living in an age where safe injection sites make sense, but they do. And I do support them, and I do think that Sarah George was bold in her move to put that forward publicly, and I do understand that there are people who have concerns about them. But essentially, when I think about what is happening at a safe injection site, we are not providing any drugs, and we are not normalizing any use of drugs. What we are doing is we are compassionately welcoming people inside, and we are saying, you come out of the shadows, and we will make sure that you do not die today. And from there, we will connect you with rehabilitation services and case management. We have seen that this can work. This is a perfect example about how Burlington can be bold, and we can lead the way. This is not something to shy away from. As I said, I understand this is something that our chief of police has concerns about, and I do look forward to having the conversation with him to find out exactly what those concerns are. But by and large, when talking about people in our community who are struggling with addiction or struggling with homelessness or struggling in some way, we need to be approaching that with compassion, not fear. And I think this is a perfect example of where we can welcome people in and show that compassion and help people get to a place where they would probably much rather be. So that's my position, yes.
Thank you. Infinite.
Safe injection sites is something that I would wholeheartedly need to hear from the voters about. That is something that I think, very difficult for a public official to say yes to, because whose neighborhood is it going to be in? It's going to be in Ward 5? I think it probably will wind up in my neighborhood in the Old North End. And I think that the voters should decide whether they want a safe, they should be able to weigh in on that.
Mauro?
I do support the legislation in Montpelier around safe injection sites. I think America has not figured out yet how to turn around this opioid crisis. Until we do, we have to be open to all solutions, including this one. And that's why I support the legislation. At best, safe injection sites will be something that addresses a small part of the addicted population. And that's why we need to be doing a whole lot more than just debating safe injection sites. And we are doing a whole lot more. In this room, once a month, we have about 70 people that sit around this U-shaped table. We make it a little bit bigger. And it has housing providers, and it has social service agencies, and it has prosecutors, and it has the corrections officers, and it has the hospital well represented there, and the Howard Center and its treatment folks are there. And for more than almost a year and a half now, we've been sitting at that table, and we are making real innovations here in Burlington that I think gives us a chance to finally turn around this terrible epidemic. The keys to the solution will be stopping overprescribing, and it will be getting as many people as possible into treatment. We have failed thousands and thousands of Vermonters, and they became addicted in many cases just by following their doctor's orders. We can't fail them again now by not giving them an opportunity, doing everything we can to get them into treatment. And that's what we do at Community Stat. We figure out new ways to get people into treatment. That's where we just launched this new program last week, where after we used to be in a city just a year ago, if someone overdosed, they went to the hospital, they would go home with no care. Now we make sure that within 60 hours, our fire chief, our deputy chief from the police, and this position, our opioid policy coordinator, one of the few cities in the country that has such a position, show up at the person who has overdosed door and help urge them, push them into treatment. And we need to keep coming up with new creative solutions like this going forward.
Infinite, is there something you want to add?
Yeah, I just need to add that, when we talk about the opioid crisis and we talk about how we're treating people addicted, I think it's a really incomplete conversation because I think the other side to that are the folks who happen to be drug sellers who are really thrown in a fire. And so when we can afford to extend some compassion to people who are addicted, I wonder what our community might look like if we extended the same kind of compassion to people who may be drug selling for economic, economic insecurity reasons.
Thank you. This one goes first to you, Infinite. And Miro said in his opening statement, he talked about the success of the sale of Burlington Telecom. But my question for you is what, if anything, would you have done differently regarding the recent sale of Burlington Telecom?
I would have supported keep Burlington Telecom local. It was really difficult to see Burlington Telecom as a Burlington Telecom user myself. It was really difficult to see Burlington Telecom in that situation to begin with. And we have a long history of Burlington has a long history of cooperatives and being a way to stabilize and have a durable local economy. Seventh Generation, Gardener Supply, ACE. So I'm actually really disappointed that as a city we couldn't figure out how to keep Burlington local, and give it another chance.
Thank you. Miro, on to you. Miro, yeah.
And you'd like me to answer the same question, what would we have done differently?
If anything.
Certainly I think anyone watching, and I think everyone was watching last fall, there were some very difficult challenges in the final months, and it took a long time, and it was in some ways painful. Others will have to judge if there are specific things that could have been done differently in that process. I think if you take a step back, though, and look at the last 6 years, I think the city has a lot to be proud of about how we addressed and dealt with what was truly one of our most challenging crises the city has ever faced. 6 years ago, we were in a lawsuit with one of the biggest banks in the world, and again, they were threatening, they were attempting to hold taxpayers responsible for tens of millions of dollars of lease payments that had not been paid. Not any payments had not been made on those lease payments. And they were also threatening to rip the fiber out of the ground, or at least asking a judge to put it into receivership, at which point the city would have had no control over its future. We negotiated tough, we negotiated hard, we had 2 different sessions of mediation. Ultimately, we got a resolution that protected the taxpayers, kept the fiber in the ground, and it gave the city this ability to direct who would get to be the right long-term partner. And we went out to the public, listened carefully to what people wanted to see in that final agreement, and we in the end, took to the council an agreement that was approved 10-2, again, with a broad coalition supporting it, that first of all ensured the fiber stays in the ground. It has price protections, and it has anti-monopoly provisions that I personally fought for. Our lawyers said we might not get, that ensures we'll never go back to the monopoly situation that marked the Adelphia Comcast years before BT. And it ensures that the company going forward will honor Burlington values. It will honor the privacy policies that are currently in place. It will honor the net neutrality policies currently in place. It will honor our digital divide efforts. It is a very good outcome that was not at all clear we would get 6 years ago.
Thank you.
It is possible that I am sitting here today because of the BT process. I would say that in my experience in government, when things get hard and decisions get hard, when you had a good or a bad process because of this. when you reach the end of a very challenging process, but it was a good one, you have a lot of people who maybe are, wiping the sweat off their brow, shaking hands and saying, boy, I didn't get what I wanted and you didn't get what you wanted, but you know what? In the end, we got what was right for Burlington. And that is not what we got at the end of the BT process. What we got was a decision made at 2 a.m. After an effort to push things through in a partisan manner that was based on a decision that a small group of people thought was right for Burlington. And, I think we had all of the elements for an entirely different outcome, but it would have involved not employing a highest bidder process to arrive at our conclusion. We had a performing asset, which was Burlington Telecom. It was performing very well. We had, and the BTAB, the Burlington Telecom Advisory Board, it said very early on, there was a strong commitment and a strong desire for local investment and local control. That was admitted and spoken to very early in the process. In the end, we had bidders and we had threats of lawsuit and we didn't have collaboration. I believe that if we had brought people together to the table, including that private money that was already engaged, and said, hey, can you hang in there a little while longer with this? And brought that, to the table with the people running this performing asset, along with that small group of committed citizens who really wanted to see things done differently. We could have come up with a compromise that put co-op in second position for a while, with the possibility of local ownership in the long run, where that private investment stayed at the table and continued to guide that telecom infrastructure business successfully until co-op is ready to take over. That's an example of how we can do things with collaborative leadership in this city, and I think we could have ended up maintaining our local control and local ownership of this Burlington Telecom asset that without, we are where we are today.
Thank you. I'll let Miro have another minute there.
Great, thanks, Sasha. Again, when we're talking about these complex issues, facts really matter. And what was clear here is that the kind of process that Karina just described was not possible. It actually would have violated the agreement that the City Council had unanimously approved and that we had agreed to, where we agreed to have an arm's length transaction to find the right long-term partner. And that was an absolutely essential part of the settlement agreement that kept Burlington Telecom fiber in the ground and kept us in control for 3 years and kept the taxpayers protected. And it just couldn't be ignored. When I hear these positions that suggest that that condition and other constraints the city faced weren't real, I hear candidates who are not recognizing the mistakes of the past and are all too willing and eager even to repeat them.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This question goes first to Miro. Where do you stand on the F-35s being based at Burlington International Airport? And did you sign the petition to get an item related to them on the ballot?
I did not sign that petition. I was offered it several times by the people working very hard, and I respect how hard people worked and how passionately many people in this community care about the F-35. I didn't feel appropriate to sign that petition because my position is where it's been for the better part of 4 or 5 years now, which is that I, like all 3 members of the federal delegation, like the past governor and the current governor, support the basing of the F-35s in Burlington. I do that because I believe, and I think my colleagues believe, that the Air National Guard has been an important part of the landscape here in Vermont for decades, and if they did not secure the F-35 basing, the future of the Air National Guard and its mission was very much in doubt. We had a great deal of public process from starting in 2010, going through a decision made in this room by the City Council by an 11-3 vote to support the basing and to go forward. And we have taken many actions since that decision was made and since the Air Force awarded the F-35s to Burlington that are very difficult to undo now at this late date. So while I respect the hard work and the passion behind the petition, I will be voting against it, and I encourage others to do so as well, both because I think the Chittenden County needs the Air National Guard here and strong. The Air National Guard members are important parts of our community, important part of the public safety, and because we made this decision, and we can't reopen it at this point without very significant consequences.
Thank you. Thank you. Karina?
Thank you. So as far as getting the F-35 ballot item on the agenda, I think the citizen referendum is something that we need to respect. And I was glad to see that the City Council did not change the language after much debate, and that it will be on as put forth by the people who, that small, thoughtful group of citizens that is out there working on this issue. You know, so I did sign the petition because if someone asks me to get something on the ballot, I will sign the petition as a matter of course. I do feel as though it's a fact that our entire federal delegation did support the basing of the F-35 at the Burlington International Airport. However, we have a citizen referendum on the ballot, and if Burlington overwhelmingly supports not having the F-35 per our election on Tuesday, March 6th, then as mayor, I would take it as my responsibility to figure out how to move that forward. In addition, I don't think you can speak about the F-35 coming to Burlington without talking about the demolition of housing that's happening in South Burlington and Winooski. You know, we are struggling to make sure we have enough affordable units, and we are demolishing affordable units every day in South Burlington and Winooski. Well, I don't know if it's every day, and facts do matter, Mr. Mayor, but what I will say is that we are demolishing these houses, and we do not have a plan to replace them, and we need to be doing it in cooperation with South Burlington and Winooski if that is something we are doing. So I'm greatly concerned about that impact, and it's something we need an answer to, and it actually needs to be our priority rather than talking about putting up a hotel. We need to be a hotel at the airport. We need to be working on replacing that affordable housing. Thank you.
I did sign the petition as well, and I am opposed to war machines in our community. I don't really understand or why it matters that our delegation is supporting the F-35s when the people are deciding that they don't want the F-35s. I don't understand why that matters. And, you know, this whole too big to fail sort of mentality of, well, you know, we're already too far into this process and we have already spent all this money. What I do hope is that our Air Guard, which I do believe is really important to Vermont, and our governor perhaps can come up with a different mission for the Air Guard, and one that is responding possibly to natural disasters and local situations, especially since, you know, we are you know, having this whole global warming thing going on. You know, we'll have a lot more natural disasters going on. So, you know, maybe it's a stretch, but maybe if we can figure out a different mission for our Air National Guard, then everybody wins.
Yes.
Thank you, Sasha and Matt. You know, Infinite, and I don't agree about this, but I appreciate you taking such a strong and clear position tonight, and you did that at the City Council meeting last week as well. I have not heard a clear position from Karina yet in this race, even though this is a topic we have been discussing for the better part of 8 years, even though the Burlington City Council explicitly took a position on this, even though 11,158 different comments were submitted during the EIS process. And I don't quite understand that. I think either Karina isn't being straight with us, or she's trying to have it both ways. And I think Burlingtonians expect more. I think Burlingtonians expect more out of their mayors. They expect mayors to lead. They expect mayors to take a stand. They expect mayors to be clear with the people they represent what their positions are, and I've always tried to do that.
We'll offer Karina a minute and Infinite a minute.
Do you think I have an opportunity to rebut that?
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you. It's true. People do expect more from their mayors, and they do expect their mayors to lead. And what I will say is that as for the position on this, it's very similar to my position on a lot of things that are already in progress. You know, there are some things that are happening in Burlington, whether they are the mall transformation project, which I voted to support because you don't turn away 200 plus million investment in your community, but you accept that into your community and you make sure that it works for the people who live here. I voted for that, as did many Burlingtonians, with a lot of reservations, but that project is moving forward. When it comes to the F-35, I have a lot of reservations, but that is already moving forward. But if the people of Burlington speak up and ask for us to do something differently, then I'm going to listen. And so I think what I'm hearing from you is that you have made up your mind despite how the ballot turns out on Election Day. So what I will say is my position is that I support what Burlingtonians support on this ballot item, and I am of the position right now that this is moving forward, but if we are proven wrong, that the people of Burlington really want to reconsider this, then as mayor, it's my obligation to listen to you. Thank you.
Just a quick announcement here. There are 2 League of Women Voters volunteers ready to pick up audience questions if you hold them up. So, anybody? Moving on. This question is for you first, Karina. Do you support improved bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure at the cost of on-street parking?
At the cost of on-street parking?
Yes.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I absolutely support bike and pedestrian enhancements in this city. I think right now I've been spending a lot of time during this campaign speaking to bikers and asking them what is more important right now, protected bike lanes or roads that are managed well. And what I would say is that we have been diverting a lot of our public resources first to accommodating the developments that are accommodating private interests in the developments downtown, but we're also diverting a lot of our energy and our focus on public works, on public bike lanes. And right now, it's been 10 years since we've paved Pine Street, and no one is in greater jeopardy from a pothole than a person on a bike. So I would absolutely support adding bike enhancements at the expense of parking, but as your mayor, I would prioritize our basic public infrastructure first, because I think that serves everyone, people in cars, people on foot, and people on bikes. Thank you.
Infinite.
Yes, I would support bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly at the cost of parking. I think right now, if you either driving up Pine Street, whatever time of day it is, as a biker, it's very dangerous. Also, I have to say, things have changed a little bit in the New North End neighborhood with the bike lanes. I have talked to people who have said that they are actually riding their bikes more now because of those bike lanes, which is something that I, quite frankly, did not think was a good idea. Yet it turned out to be that some folks are finding it useful. So we'll see what happens with the development of the Burlington College land and what kind of impact that might have for bikers and walkers and drivers in the city.
Thank you. Miro?
Thanks. Let me start by saying that although we're having a difficult winter and it's creating some very unusual road conditions, the current quality of Pine Street and parts of North Avenue is not acceptable. And that's why I've been out there inspecting it, talking to Chapin Spencer, our director, basically every day, trying new ways of addressing the situation temporarily until the asphalt plants open in the spring and we can do a proper fix. I think the condition of those roads does point out the need for sustained major new investment in our core infrastructure. This administration has been very committed to that. That's why we took this 5-year, $50 million sustainable infrastructure plan to the council and the voters last fall, and I was very excited that the 76% of the public supported that, and we have just finished our first year of implementing that plan, in which we have paved twice as many roads as we have done historically. We have replaced 3 times as many sidewalks as we have done historically. This is an area where I would love the opportunity to finish the job for the people of Burlington over the next 4 years, continuing to implement the sustainable infrastructure plan. I think would be one of many areas where a change in leadership would really be a setback to our improving of the infrastructure. Let me say specifically about bike lanes. I think I've been pretty clear on this. I think protected bike lanes are a key part of our future. I think successful 21st century cities need protected bike lanes. We will have to be very careful about the trade-offs that we impose when we move in that direction. And we should never take lightly we sweat out every single parking space that we lose. If we are unwilling to lose any spaces, we will never get to the kind of system that Montreal has, that Pittsburgh has, and New York City increasingly has, these northern, northeastern cities that have outstanding bike infrastructure and a new transportation network that makes a big difference on the quality of life of the people living there.
Thank you.
I just have to say, when you talk about 70% of the public, passed a ballot item, I'm having a hard time with that number. I will say that one thing you really have been good at is manufacturing consent for the ballot items that you want to see passed. And just to say that, because you've been pumping thousands of dollars into a PAC doesn't mean that we've been having extensive public engagement on these ballot items. So I just think it's necessary to make that point. Thank you.
I just wanted to add in a follow-up. Everyone mentioned the potholes, specifically on Pine Street. I think it's sort of unavoidable at this point. So my question starting with Infinite, would be, what would you do to improve roadway conditions when you have a winter such as this, when there are these massive potholes, impeding travel, whether you're riding a bike or riding in a car or riding on the bus, anything?
Yeah, that's public works, right? And I have to say, not being a public works expert, that I would have to weigh in with that department and figure out what their long-term plan is, what we've been doing for the past decade, and sort of just take a very long-term look at that. So yeah, I trust that the folks in the Public Works Department have the tools to do what they need to do, and so I would defer to that department. That was great.
Miro.
Thanks, Sasha. Do we have 2 minutes for this, or just 1 for this follow-up?
2.
Okay.
2 minutes.
Well, I actually think what's going on Pine Street is a really interesting example of the approach that this administration has tried to take to core infrastructure efforts. It has been a long time, it's really, for decades, an issue the city has faced is that we have underinvested in Pine Street because of the approaching, what used to be known as the Southern Connector and now the Champlain Parkway. When the federal government will make, and the state government will help us make massive investments in that corridor that will dramatically improve that corridor. And we are, I'm happy to say, closer to actually building that project than we have ever been before. We have an Act 250 permit. We have cleared many of the right-of-way issues, and we're about a year away from constructing it. And when we do, we have also changed the plan. It is not the plan that our administration inherited 6 years ago. It's actually a plan that has outstanding 21st century features. It will improve bike and pedestrian infrastructure and make that safer all along the corridor. Since that is coming in a year, what we are going to be doing in the 2018 construction season is we'll actually be replacing the water lines, which are very much in need of repair, have never been proactively replaced, and we really have not had a policy of doing that anywhere in the city. And as a result of that former policy, we would see our water lines, we would wait to replace them until they broke. And when would they break? They would break in the middle of a winter like this, in the middle of the night. Often, too often, where there are dozens of streets where the lines broke the year after we had done a repaving effort. We don't want to keep making that mistake. That's why we'll be using the new voter-approved bond. We will be replacing the water lines on Pine Street over the course of this summer, so they won't have to dig into it and rebuild Pine Street once we finally build the Champlain Parkway about a year from now.
Thank you. Karina.
So, I have spoken to this a little bit, before, but I would say that as a person, the mayor being responsible for the management and the direction of the city, I have found in running my own business that you can find your best way forward often by asking the people who work for the city, ask the people who work for the city why it's working and why it's not working. And as mayor, I will take their lead. I also just want to address that, the mayor has implied that I'm going to bring the city backwards. And as far as management of the city, what I will say is this. I know, I have served this city, both as a councilor, but also on the budget transition team for Mayor Weinberger, and I know he respects what I bring to the table. And it has been 4.5 years since I left the mayor's administration, and I would appreciate it if the mayor didn't disparage what it is that I bring to the table. I do have the skills to manage the city as a business owner, and I do know what I'm getting into, and I don't plan to take us backwards. I plan to take us forwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question goes first to Miro. Do you know anyone who's on food stamps, has trouble paying medical bills, or makes less than $15 an hour? And how does that, or how will that, inform your mayorship?
Yeah, Matt, thank you for this question. I know many people that fit that description. Many of the parents in the school where Lee Lynn went to school in the Old North End for the last 5 years meet that description. I spent 15 years as an affordable housing developer building permanently affordable low-income homes for people in New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And basically the population that we were serving fit that description. And as mayor, one of the times that I'm proudest of, and one of the accomplishments I'm proudest of, is that when the Farrington's mobile home park was at risk of being sold, and when that vulnerable population that was living there faced a very uncertain future, the city got involved, and I personally got involved, and I sat with the head of the Residents Association, Teresa Lefebvre, out behind Station 4, and we worked out the details about how the city could use the Housing Trust Fund and make some zoning changes to help add a few new energy-efficient mobile homes to the park, and that would make a difference with the refinancing of that. And after that work, because of the leadership of the residents and because the city was able to play an important role, the residents were able to take control of their future and ensure that the Farrington's mobile home park became the North Avenue Co-op, where it is successfully improving today. That's how I've tried to use that. That's how I've tried to work with some of the most vulnerable people in our community when I've had an opportunity to as mayor.
Thank you. Karina.
Thank you for the question. One thing I think people don't know about me, and I will share, is that, you know, my mother was a single mother until I was 14. And as a child, we grew up with food stamps, and we grew up with red tickets, which we were trading in for our lunches, our lunch trays, which some kids had red tickets and other kids did not. And that was challenging. The library was my childcare after school. And I had a working mother who worked incredibly hard to figure out how to accommodate the needs, to be able to move ahead in this world and in this life. And she was very challenged to do it. And because of that, she founded the mayor's youth office here in the city. And out of that gave rise to the Burlington After School Program, which was called City Kids. We didn't have one before that. And also the 242 Main Teen Center. I am so proud of the things that my mother did to accommodate her family, but also families all throughout this community. You know, we also saw the development of the Burlington Children's Space in Burlington. And it was the city's first sliding scale child care program, because no family should be able to be in a position where they couldn't afford child care. Our commitment to these programs is waning. We currently have an after-school program in the city where workers are paid between $11 and $14.50 an hour for the elementary school after-school program, and the most hours they can get working all week is 17. So the problem is nobody wants the job, and it's understaffed, and it's a struggle for our families who say my only choice is $14 a day after school, and it's understaffed and chaotic, and it's not good enough. We have to re-up our commitment to Burlington's working families, and we need to commit to make sure that there are no child care waiting lists, and we can do that in this community. And, you know, I would just add, if I don't know if I have time, but I think that the mayor's quote when Farrington Trailer Park was going to come on the market was basically to the effect that the city did not yet have a position. And it is the affordable housing community and the co-op community that rose up and said, we need to stand by the people of Farrington Trailer Park and make sure they keep their homes.
Infinite.
Yeah, so when I moved to Burlington in 1991 alone with 20 bucks in my pocket, frankly, I didn't want to be on food stamps. And so I compromised my integrity and did the stupidest thing and dealt drugs and learned from that. Today, now I live in the Old North End at the center of the gentrification, the affordable housing crisis, the opioid crisis, and I think they're all connected. You know, in order to receive services in the city, you have to really have next to nothing in order to get any help. You have to hit rock bottom. And so it's really difficult, you know, for people to come up. And as a community organizer in the Burlington School District, you know, working with folks who, you know, have gone through some of these experiences, I've learned that there's actually a lot of power there because we have come together to collectively identify issues and partner with administrators, public officials, classroom teachers to identify solutions and find ways to implement them. And so we don't need to feel sorry for low-income communities. I think we need to go into low-income communities and work with low-income communities and follow their lead, actually.
Miro, do you want a minute there?
I appreciate it, Sasha. Just in that I do think it's important to state that the city's commitment to our youth and to working with the communities, as Infinite described, we've not taken any step back from that. In fact, in many ways, we have doubled down on those important progressive policies that have defined us as a city for so long. We doubled the Housing Trust Fund in the budgets that I've been responsible for. We have in the budget this year for the first time $500,000 to start a early learning initiative, because we don't invest enough in Burlington children, low-income children, in their first 1,000 days of life. And as a result, there are all sorts of downstream negative impacts that our low-income kids too often suffer from. We have joined President Obama and launched through the CEDO office a My Brother's Keeper initiative to ensure that all of our youth, particularly our young men of color, have the opportunities that they need to succeed. So we launched the Old North End Community Center, which is an important addition to the Old North End. This is an important part of what this administration has been about.
Thank you, Miro. And Karina, would you like an opportunity?
Thank you. You know, I would just say that as a member of the Champlain Housing Trust Board for 6 years, two things. One is that as I go around the community and meet with people in our community who do not meet the qualifications to afford Champlain Housing Trust housing, I am very aware of the acute need to get out into our affordable housing communities and work on that issue. I would also say that there was a time that our nonprofit partners worked in partnership with our Community and Economic Development Office, and very much it seems as though our nonprofits are working on their own. And when we talk about the St. Joe's Community Center, I'm not sure what credit the city is allowed to take for the decision to make a public investment into St. Joe's and make sure that those tenants, AALV, Robin's Nest, and the Family Room, all have the opportunity and others to continue to be in that space. I think that we have to give credit where credit is due, and that is to the leaders in our nonprofit community who made that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to briefly say that, while I do appreciate that the mayor has looked at My Brother's Keeper as a means for addressing what's happening with our youth of color, we cannot cut and paste programs from the Obama administration or anywhere else and expect them to work in this community. I think we really need to roll our sleeves up and figure out what's happening here in order to figure out, how to move forward and actually make a real difference.
Thank you. We want to thank the audience, both here and online, for submitting so many good questions tonight. Molly Walsh from 7 Days and Megan O'Rourke with Channel 17 are working over here off to the side. If you have a question, bring it to them. And they are kind of consolidating these questions for us and bringing them to us. We're hoping to get to as many as possible. So with that in mind.
Sure, I'll start here. And this goes to Karina first. Do you think the Everyone Loves a Parade mural downtown is problematic? And why or why not?
Thank you. I have been speaking up on this since members of our community brought up, the experience of walking by that mural as a person of color and seeing such a parade of white individuals that a small group of people in our community have decided are important to put on the wall. I feel very strongly that we cannot kick the can down the road until after Election Day to decide what to do with that mural, because that is communicating disrespect to people in our community who are hurt by that mural. I would say that we got ourselves into trouble the moment we did two things as a community, and I think we all need to take responsibility for this, because this happened while everybody was watching and participating, and most of us acted as if it was fine. We had two things that happened. One is that we decided that the premise for our mural and celebrating our story should begin with when the European settlers arrived here. I think that was a mistake. Our story began before then. And also there are a lot of people who feel that the parade that followed European settlers arriving, the rest is history. And I think in addition, the other mistake we made was we empowered a small group of people, people who already held power in the city, to come up with a list of names as suggestions to the artists for who should be represented on the mural. That's an exclusive process. You know, we have a much, much bigger story to tell than what is, that can be told by selecting certain individuals and painting them on the wall. We need to celebrate all of our people and celebrate all of our accomplishments in this community, and it does not mean just people who hold power and have made accomplishments and have done so with privileges that are afforded to them, you know, through just basically the stroke of luck. So I support taking it down, and I think we need to take it down and decide to take it down before Election Day, and I think everyone should have to take a position on it. It's not comfortable for people that this is the conclusion we have to arrive at, but it's our responsibility to make this right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Infinite.
Speaking about discomfort, I think the person who I want to give credit to for bringing attention to that mural is an individual by the name of Albert Petrarca, who not a very popular person, you know, in our community, but I just want to say that you know, for someone to put their body on the line and you know, go up there and make a statement and to, you know, to say take it off the wall. I think you know, I'm really actually proud that we have white folks in our community that's willing to put their body on the line and take that risk. Okay, it's an easy one. I think the mirror should come down. I think it's just the beginning. I think if we look around us, we'll see you know, white supremacist culture in a lot of different parts of our community. And I think it's pretty clear that the process of having that put on the wall was, you know, decided by, I think we need to take a step back and look at that process and see how we got there and see how we came to put such its outlandish narrative of our history on a wall downtown Burlington, which quite frankly isn't for Burlingtonians or really for visitors and tourists who come here. So I think we really need to take a hard look at how we're using our downtown and who it's actually for.
Thank you. Miro.
Thank you, Sasha and Matt, for this question. You know, this is a challenging issue. It goes back to 2009, 2010 with the quadricentennial, and I think it's important to acknowledge that the mural represents a well-intentioned effort by many Burlingtonians who were involved back then. It was that did some positive things. That alleyway is a lot better than it used to be with respect to some of the public safety concerns that had been raised. And there are many people who enjoy the mural. At the same time, it is clear to me that there are important omissions within it. It is clear to me that it does not tell the welcoming, inclusive story that we strive to as Burlington in the year 2018. And really that we need to succeed as a 21st century city. And that's why for weeks now, I appreciate in particular Councilor Ali Jiang, who has been a real leader on this issue and is with us tonight. I have been saying for weeks, this is an issue we need to do something about, and I supported the resolution that came to the council last Monday that would have address this issue the way I think it needs to be. There are complexities here, there are artists' rights, there are issues of government overreach since the city did not pay for this issue that need to be sorted through. I think the best way to do that is to create a balanced committee with people that have many different perspectives and have them grapple with these issues and the possible solutions to it for some time and come back to the council and the mayor. I don't think this is an issue where the mayor, without listening to Burlingtonians, should be imposing a solution. I don't think it would be well received, and I think it may well lead to a problematic backlash if we just did that. I think a better route is to sort our way through this with a well-respected committee with many different perspectives. I think that's how we get through this.
Thank you. This question goes first to Infinite. How do you see the city resolving the Moran plant situation?
Give it to the artist.
Miro?
So, you know, the Moran project is certainly, you know, when you serve as mayor for 6 years, not everything goes exactly as you hope it will. And, you know, I was very optimistic and hopeful about Moran when we went to the voters in 2014 with a slate of other improvements to restore, rebuild, give new birth to the northern waterfront. And I was hopeful that this last best effort to secure an ambitious redevelopment of the building might succeed. And we gave it 3.5 years to try to succeed, and it was very painful for me to acknowledge that over that 3.5 years, the effort just had not gotten far enough. And I didn't think it was doing anyone any favors to continue to hope that it would ultimately succeed, which is why I made that difficult decision last summer to go in a new direction. You know, this isn't the first time that the city has struggled to redevelop the Moran plant because there are many unique challenges to that site. It has environmental challenges, it has constitutional challenges, and that the Vermont Constitution limits what you can do with the site. It has, you know, it is a unique building that defies easy adaptive reuse. I think we need a new goal. You know, after 30 years of attempting a full, ambitious redevelopment, I think we need to say, and I'm excited about this opportunity. It's one of the things I'm most excited about getting to work on the next 3 years. I think we need to say, look, we have reserved about $6 million to do something great with this site. And we have a good chance to do something great because so much other progress has happened over the last few years around that. How do we figure out the right solution that uses this money that we've reserved to get to an outstanding outcome? I envision that going through a significant public engagement process like we always do for major projects. And I'm pretty optimistic now that we change the goal, we will come through this quickly and get to an outcome where that site supports all the other progress that we've made on the northern waterfront.
Thank you. Karina?
You know, I spoke to Memorial Auditorium in my opening statement because it's very important. Moran Plan as well. I spoke to the Moran Plan in my opening statement because I think this is really important to our community. You know, 6 years ago, Mayor Weinberger ran on wanting to get projects moving again. And this has been a tough one, but what I saw was that we had a local group of people who came together and went through a public process. We had local investment at the table. We had creative individuals. We had businesses. We had artists. We had the farmers market. And we had a group who thought they had a plan. And what we got was a unilateral decision to end that conversation before we really got transparency about why that was happening. You know, this is an example of something that we can move forward with. My role as mayor would be to restart that conversation and pick up where we left off. If we fell short somewhere, let's figure out how to make it work, because I know that there are people throughout this community who still want to see this project happen and still want New Moran Inc. to be a reality. And I think as a community, we ought to invite them back in to Contoy's Auditorium and invite people in, and let's say, how do we get there? Because it was a great idea.
Infinite.
So I was only half kidding about the give it to the artist. I was actually very much involved in that process under Bob Kitz's leadership, and it was really the financial crisis that halted, you know, that project. You know, it was I was on the Moran advisory group, and I wanted to make sure that whatever they built there was accessible to you know, low-income folks in our community. And so I do think there is a plan there that needs to be invested in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This next question goes first to Miro. We've had a lot of questions from the audience about the role of neighborhood planning assemblies. What do you think is the role of NPAs in local government?
Thanks, Sasha. I mean, clearly the MPAs are a really important part of the Burlington community landscape, and they have been for a long time, and I support them. There is this notion that somehow we have continued the funding for the MPAs in recent years, and would be open to a specific proposal to increase them going forward. My belief is that in addition to the MPAs, there are many other, there's a lot of other important work that the city needs to do if it is going to properly respond to its constituents and make good decisions. And that's why we haven't stopped with going to the MPAs. When we're doing something like rebuilding the northern waterfront, we also had this public investment action plan process where we crowdsourced the ideas for the northern waterfront from the community and got 140 different ideas, and then had a committee take public testimony to narrow those ideas down, and then take a slate to the administration, and then the city council, and then ultimately the voters. And that, I think that having that inclusive engagement process led to broad support at the ballot box. We have, we believe that the way, this is an administration that came into office at a time when it was very difficult to get anything done for the city, and when the public trust really had been shattered between City Hall and the rest of the community. And we have believed the way you restore that is through good communication, is through being a very accessible administration. It's through having these good public engagement processes like we did with the Public Investment Action Plan. It is through transparency efforts like the BTV data effort. And the way we know that it is working is that every time we have taken an initiative to the voters over the last 6 years, a strong majority of voters have supported it. Thank you.
Thank you. Karina?
Thank you. In the 80s, when the neighborhood planning assemblies were founded, it was really with the concept that we need to decentralize power. And they are a great concept, and at times they have run well, and at times they have not run as well, and some NPAs are more effective at engaging citizenry than others. But what we do know is that they're important, and in order to decentralize power, you have to share power. And I think we need to look at how we have evolved as an NPA. Initially, when NPAs were founded, I believe it was $1 million of community development block grant money that was put out to the NPA with the question, what do we do with it? That's not the kind of conversations our NPAs are having today. And I think it's time for us to re-empower our NPAs with some actual money and some actual roles when it comes to setting priorities and setting budgeting priorities. I would also add, in addition to our NPAs, our neighborhood planning assemblies, we need to look at the role of commissions in our community, which are also about decentralizing power and sharing power throughout our community, and really engaging people to be active and involved in our communities. Right now, when we appoint someone to the to a commission, it comes to the city council. That very much limits who can participate on our commissions. And I do think we should involve our neighborhood planning assemblies in identifying commission candidates and participating in that. If we're going to change the way we do things in the city, and if we're going to actually bring people back into the conversation, it's because they're going to have a seat at the table, which includes our commissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Infinite.
So I have spent a lot of time at our neighborhood planning assemblies, and there are some very, very basic things that I think we could do to empower them. One of them actually being funding them more and not taking money away from the neighborhood planning assemblies. Right now we have one public engagement specialist that has to work with all of the NPAs across the city. And I think we can afford to actually staff each NPA with at least one public engagement specialist. I think we could also afford to provide childcare for people who are interested in coming to our neighborhood planning assemblies. I think we can afford to help with transportation. I think we can afford to feed people to be in that spaces, in those spaces, because that is the laboratory. That is actually where we are going to learn what's really going on in our neighborhoods. The neighborhood planning assemblies are one of the gems, and which don't always work in every community, but they are one of the gems that we have in our local government that we should be relying on more often for not just boards and commissions, but also hearing from them around who we appoint as our department heads. If you want to talk about decentralizing power, it shouldn't just be, in my opinion, up to the mayor to decide who our department heads should be.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question goes first to Karina. What makes you stand apart from the other candidates?
That's a tough one. Well, I am a woman. That is true. And we have not yet had a woman mayor, but that is not why I'm running. I think what thing that makes me stand apart is that, you know, I am someone who has business experience, who is a mother in this community, who has the skills and experience to step up to running for mayor at this time. This is not a question that I have a canned answer for. I think that that is really up to the people of Burlington to figure out.
Thank you. Infinite? What makes you stand apart from the other candidates?
You should ask the press that. What makes me stand apart from I think the other candidates is what sometimes makes me seem to people unelectable, actually. You know, and it's not just you know, the color of my skin or my you know, my background. It's also, you know, the way I approach problems, and not in a managerial fashion, you know, but collectively, it's the way that we've approaching this campaign, where we are very process heavy, and you know, there's no top-down way of working with each other. And quite frankly, you know, I think the reason for you know, me taking this on right now, which is really not the best timing, is because of I feel like my willingness to make a sacrifice to my community, and to you know, give back all that I have, you know, which is, you know, my body and my experiences and my love for people.
Thank you. Thank you. Miro?
Thank you, Matthew. I think I bring a few important differences to this position. I, at this point, have a 6-year record of proven leadership and establishing that I can move the city forward and address some of our biggest challenges. That leadership, I think, is in areas that include that include getting all the different city departments to work together as they never had previously. We have a history of fractured silo city government that goes back to when we actually had the 11 different commissions tried to run the city, and you had, as a result of that, where you had different department heads reporting to different people, you did not have all the different elements of the city working towards common goals, working towards common visions, understanding common priorities. I bring a strong commitment to fiscal responsibility to office. You know, I've heard the other candidates suggest we kind of check that box, and we can now move on to other more important priorities. I don't believe it works that way. I think you need to stay vigilant on fiscal responsibility. It's an ethic that you need to continually commit to. Like every household has to worry about their budget every month and make sure they're not overspending month to month if they're going to make progress towards their long-term goals. It's the same thing for a city, and that's going to need to be the case for the next 3 years as well. And finally, I think I have proven record also in making investments and improving our core public infrastructure, our public assets, our public spaces, and we're just at the beginning of that. We're beginning of this, I think, outstanding era of improving our public assets, and I would love the opportunity to continue to lead that effort.
Thank you.
So I have one last question here, and then we'll get to closing statements from every candidate. This question goes first to Infinite. Do you support the proposed school budget calls for a nearly 8% property tax increase? Is that too much?
It is too much, and I still support it. I support it because of the constraints that the school board has because of what's going on in politics in Montpelier. I support it because I know some of the folks on the school board who work really hard and don't just show up to vote to make that organization work. I support it because I know that there are some teachers and administrators there who are working really hard, and we deserve to fund the best education we can pay for.
Thank you. Miro.
Thanks, Sasha. I do support this year's school budget. As painful as an 8% increase will be, just as I have supported 5 of the 6 school budgets in the time I've been mayor. And I agree with Infinite on this, that the main source of this tax increase is from the statewide financing system, which has not responded to the new reality, which is that Vermont is losing its school children, and that we need a new system to ensure that we don't continue to see these kind of year-over-year tax increases. This is why I did support Act 46, which was, and did that through the Mayor's Coalition and the Vermont League of Cities and Towns as an important step towards encouraging other school districts to become more like Burlington's successful school district, and that there was, we're moving towards a system where there is one board that is responsible for the whole K through 12 education system, which I think is an important part of local boards taking responsibility and getting the system under control. It's why I'm very much open to the new conversation happening in Montpelier this year that has some promise and energy behind it, and we'll continue to engage that. I also believe that what the mayor can do and needs to do is recognize that the schools are critical to our future. I'm a big believer in public education. I'm a product of Vermont Public Schools. My mom was a public school teacher in New Hampshire for over 30 years. My daughter, Lee Lynn, is at Edmonds Middle School after going to IAA, and I expect our younger daughter, Ada, will, when she gets to kindergarten in a couple of years, go through the public school system as well. There's nothing more important for the future of the city, for its economic future and social future, than a strong school system, which is why, as mayor over the last 6 years, I've done everything I can in the limited role the mayor has to support the school district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karina.
I wanted an opportunity to rebut the last time when it was mentioned about fiscal responsibility and other candidates are saying we could check the box. I do feel like I should have an opportunity to rebut that in this question, and I request a little extra time.
Okay.
Okay, great. So yes, right now in this year, we are seeing that our school board has put forth a 7.999% budget that is only has only put forward a 1% increase. So if you couldn't have a better illustration of the education financing system, as well as what's happening in Montpelier, is negatively impacting our city, we have that this year. You know, I think though, I would frame it a little differently. This past year, you know, last year, Governor Scott wanted to give an unfunded tax cut, funded with surplus dollars, which meant they're gone after 1 year. In addition, Act 46 contributed to this education hole that we're trying to fill. You know, it was 40 million, then it was 50 million, and now it's probably going to be higher. So we're continually hearing that this hole is larger to fill than we had thought. We need a mayor who's willing to stand up to Governor Scott and say that the kids in Burlington need to come first, and our education needs to not be funding the governor's tax cuts. It's not acceptable that Burlington is paying a significant price right now when there is a very much an anti-Burlington agenda in Montpelier. But also, it's complicated. You know, when we talk about the fiscal stability in the city and we talk about what's happening with education financing and what's happening with our bond rating on the city side, you know, we're hearing that we have solved things in the city, things are really looking up, but we have to go back and say what is actually happening. We are, in some regards, balancing the books of the city on the school side. And the school department, the school board, frankly, has been having to figure out how to pick up the lost income. Because of the education financing system, first we, as a city, as the mayor was coming in, was that with extra time or?
I'll give you another minute.
Okay, thank you. You know, as the mayor was coming in, it was already happening that the pension payments for the teachers that used to come from the city budget were going to have to be picked up on the school side, and it was over $1 million a year, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million. But we didn't have a corresponding tax decrease on the city side when we lost that expense. In addition, the education financing system said half of our pilot revenues from our, you know, the payment in lieu of taxes are supposed to go over to the school side can no longer happen because of education financing. The schools also lost that revenue to the tune of 1.4 million a year. And consequently, what has happened is our funds in the unreserved funds on the city side have been rising. And with that, our bond rating is going up. You cannot claim fiscal stability and fiscal responsibility when you have one house in good order and the other one falling apart. You know, it is related. We are experiencing good bond ratings on the city side because of money that used to go to the schools, and we have not had a corresponding tax decrease. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you, Miro,
Miro, you can have a minute.
Okay, great. Thanks. You know, again, I think this is a situation where facts matter, where laws matter, and where the Constitution matters. When I came into office in 2015, the Agency of Education and the Burlington School District were signed an agreement saying that these pilot funds could not lawfully, cannot constitutionally continue to be used to fund the school district. And we worked very hard at that time to minimize, and this was 4 years ago now, we've worked very hard to minimize the impact that that change would have on the school district, found a way for hundreds of thousands of dollars to continue to help the schools, and we continue to do that work. And even in the last couple of weeks, we found another $68,000 that is going to directly help with the school budget next year. What cannot lawfully be spent on the school district, we are now using to fund three big things. This is what is funding the Early Learning Initiative. This is what is funding part of our response to the heroin epidemic, which we've lost too many of our kids to. This is what is funding the improvements, the enhancements of the library system. Karina's position would essentially gut and cut all of those programs. I'm not going to let that happen.
Thank you.
I mean, I would simply say that's not my position to gut and defund all those programs, and that a grant program that has started this year does not take, doesn't undo the fact that over the last several years, 1.4 million has not been advanced, and it doesn't undo the fact that we were no longer responsible for paying for these teachers' pension funds, and that the school board has had to really be very austere in its budgeting to be able to make up for the loss of that revenue. Yes, there's 100,000 here and 100,000 there, but it does not amount to the several million per year that we have not been forwarding. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move up now to our final statements from candidates. As a reminder, these are up to 2 minutes long. First up is Miro Weinberger.
Well, thank you again to 7 Days, to Channel 17, and the League of Conservation Voters for, League of Women Voters for supporting tonight's important forum. We've heard a lot tonight about public process and engagement, and I just, at the risk of repeating a couple of things I've said, want to make it really clear where I stand on this. This administration believes that nothing is more important than the public trust, and from day one, we have worked very hard to rebuild what had been a shattered public trust and to make good on that and to deliver on what the people of Burlington are entrusting us to do. We have done that, again, through being a very accessible administration. If you want to meet with me or anyone else in this administration, we will make that happen. If we believe in doing it through good communication, through the traditional media, and through using new social media in ways that the city has never done before. We believe deeply in responsiveness to the public, and that is why we have innovated the See-Click-Fix program so that constituents can track what is happening. And again, here's how we know that all these initiatives are working. 17 times we have gone to the public for support in rebuilding our downtown, rebuilding our waterfront, fixing our finances, and every time the people have supported these initiatives, often by large majorities. I want to finish by telling a story about Tom and Carolyn, which is a young couple that I met in the Old North End while door knocking this weekend. Tom works for a social service agency, and Carolyn is, and I'm not using the real names just to protect them, but Carolyn works for a downtown restaurant. And they're building their apartment. They kept it beautifully, but it was in rough shape. It was falling apart. They're paying way too much for it. They're talking about moving out of Burlington. And I've seen this happen way too many times in the years that I've lived in Burlington. And we've got to stop it. And the way to stop it is to have new investments in our downtown, new investments in housing, new investment in jobs. I think in many ways that's what this election is about. We are making progress on these issues. And I ask your support to make sure that we keep moving forward so that Burlington can remain what it has been for 150 years, the city of opportunity for people of all incomes and backgrounds and ages. And I would love the opportunity. I ask for your vote on March 6th so I can keep working towards that vision of Burlington. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for showing up tonight. I will just say a few things. I think one thing I've learned about politics, it's a lot about who you stand with and what you're willing to fight for. For me, when we think about what's happening in the city, and we have massive transformation happening in our city and lots of investment coming in, and I think a lot of us are asking the question, who is this good for, and what is it going to do for the people who live here? What is it going to do for us? And we're looking at this, the development of a lot of high rent housing as well as commercial space, and it's not bringing the cost of rent down, and it's not doing a lot for the people who live here. I think we need to take a pause and we need to check our priorities. CEDO has historically been an office that works very hard to engage the citizenry throughout this community and make sure that our priorities are about the people who live here. For me, if I'm elected mayor, the issues that I will work on, in addition to managing the city in a fiscally responsible manner, are making sure that childcare is accessible to everyone who lives here throughout the city. After-school programs every day are high quality and available to all. Our schools are high quality, that no one is turned away from summer school for lack of space, and that every day of the summer there is quality and enriching programs so that we can support our families who live here. I think we need to foster our arts and music scene. We need to continue to build community and address our transportation challenges. We can do all of these things and more, but only if we have leadership in City Hall that knows how to bring people together and empower people who live in our city, nonprofits, business owners, creative individuals. But first, we must shake up City Hall. I invite you to join me in envisioning a new era in Burlington with leadership that gets us and knows how to lead us forward. We can again lead the way. Thank you.
So, the seven authorities of a mayor: carry out laws and ordinances, appoint department heads, assure performance of jobs by subordinate officers, recommend measures, act as chief peace officer, my favorite, prepare the annual budget, and act as the chair of Board of Finance. And believe it or not, I can do that job. And not only can I do that job, I will bring a totally different approach to it. As a community organizer, I'd work with the Burlington School District, the University of Vermont, and the small business community and other major institutions in the city to focus on building the capacity of our senior population, people trying to improve their economic well-being, and cultivating the leadership of our youth. Because when we take care of these folks, everybody wins.
Thank you. Thank you. We unfortunately weren't able to get to every question tonight, but we're very grateful to the public for the many thoughtful questions that were submitted. On behalf of 7 Days, I'd like to thank our partners with the League of Women Voters and Channel 17 with putting this forum together for us. And most of all, I'd like to thank the candidates for turning out and sharing their thoughts and positions with us. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you all.